It's about to get interesting, so subscribe and hit like so you don't miss the top content.
I always thought love was something simple. You meet someone, you fall in love, you build a future together, but life is never that simple. Sometimes feelings get confused and the heart is at a crossroads. I moved to New York a few years ago, full of ambition and hope. This city immediately mesmerized me with its rhythm, bustling streets, and endless possibilities. I worked in marketing, spending my days in the office, trying to build the career I dreamed of. Time passed, and soon I met Lily. Lily was the epitome of stability. She is smart, sensible, reserved, yet incredibly caring. There was a kind of quiet confidence about her that made me feel safe. We bonded quickly, and soon I felt like I had found the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. She knew me better than anyone, understood me without words, supported me in difficult moments. Our everyday life was predictable but cozy. We had breakfast together before work, discussed plans for the future, sometimes went on trips. She never made a scene, never made me doubt myself. We were already thinking about moving in together when Emma burst into my life. Emma was the exact opposite of Lily. She didn't know what peace was. She made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a precipice. Exciting, dangerous, exciting. She appeared suddenly, like a hurricane, and turned everything upside down. We met at a party at a mutual friend's house, and from the first minute I realized that I couldn't hold back. She had a spark, a wildness, a casual boldness I'd never seen before. She could laugh at the most unexpected moment, could grab me by the hand and drag me into the heart of the night city without thinking about tomorrow. I had never been an adventure seeker, but around her I felt like I was living. There was no calculation, no plans, just the moment, just the present. We rode around Brooklyn on a motorcycle, took spontaneous flights to other cities, and spent nights discussing dreams that had no room for predictability. She made me feel like a different person, someone I may have always wanted to be but was afraid to be. I began to be torn between the two. Lily was my home, the one who truly knew me. She didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't try to remake me. With her, I felt protected, felt like we could get through any challenge. But with Emma, I forgot who I was, and I liked that. There was more emotion with her, more passion, more risk. Every day I woke up feeling like I was facing a choice that I would have to make sooner or later. Lily expected me to be determined, but she didn't push me. She loved me, and I knew it. Emma didn't expect anything. She just lived in her world, where I was either in or out. This city had given me everything: a job, ambition, opportunity, but now it demanded something more from me. I had to choose, and I didn't know if I could. Time moved inexorably forward, but my mind was stuck between two realities. During the day, I tried to go about my normal life: work, calls, meetings, but deep down, I knew I couldn't avoid making a choice. Every minute I spent thinking about it only made it more difficult. Emily was on one side. We'd known each other for years. She'd been a part of my life for so long that she seemed like an integral part of it. With her I felt comfort, stability, predictability. We could be silent for hours and understand each other without words. She knew my habits, my weaknesses, my dreams. I didn't need to pretend or explain. She just accepted me for who I was. But was it love? Or was it just attachment? Fear of change? Sarah, on the other hand, she appeared suddenly, like a hurricane, burst into my life and turned everything upside down. She made me feel like a different person, more alive, more spontaneous, more passionate. She opened up a world in front of me that I hadn't even considered. I laughed with her in a way I had not laughed for a long time. I forgot about time, about problems, about reality. Her eyes reflected boundless freedom, her touch a promise of something new. But how real was it? Or was it just infatuation, illusion, temptation? I tried to pull away, not to decide, but it was impossible. Everything that had seemed simple before was now taking on new colors. Conversations with Emily were getting more and more tense, and I could feel her anxiety, her fear of losing me. Sarah waited, not pushing, but I could see the question in her eyes. When are you going to make up your mind? I needed to make a decision. It wasn't fair for either of them to go on like this. But how to choose? How do I figure out what's important and what's temporary? Leave the familiar and stable for the new and uncharted, or stay where I am loved and accept the fact that passion fades sooner or later. Every day I told myself that I'd figure it out tomorrow, but tomorrow came and I was left at a crossroads again. That choice was inevitable. The only question was whether I had the courage to make it. I stood in front of the windows of a tall building, looking out at a city that never slept. New York City was alive, cars rushing down the streets, people scurrying between skyscrapers, advertising lights flickering, giving the illusion of endless motion. But inside me, there was silence, emptiness. After meeting Emily and Sophia, my life had become a series of doubts. I knew I would have to make a decision at some point, but the more I thought about it, the harder it became. Emily was the epitome of stability, the very safe haven that every person seeking peace dreams of. Her kindness, her understanding, her faith in me, all of it enveloped me in the warmth I sometimes lacked in this hectic world. Sophia, on the other hand, was a storm, passionate, bright, full of emotion. Her laughter could drive me crazy. Her gaze burned through me, and I felt more alive around her than ever. She was a risk, a challenge, an opportunity to leave everything and go into the unknown, and that was her strength. I tried to avoid the choice, but it was becoming more and more inevitable. One evening, after a long day at work, I got a text from Emily. "We need to talk." My heart clenched. She understood everything. I knew Sophia wasn't staying away. Her feelings were just as strong, and she wasn't going to just back down. When I entered Emily's apartment, she greeted me with a calm look, but I could sense her anxiety. She didn't accuse, she didn't yell, she just asked, "Have you made your choice?" And in that moment, I realized I couldn't drag it out any longer. That same night, I went to Sophia's house. She opened the door, her eyes glistening as if she knew why I had come. Her hands trembled as she pressed herself against me. "Tell me just one thing. Are you willing to give up everything for me?" she whispered. I closed my eyes. Memories flashed through my mind, walking with Emily through the fall park, Sophia's laughter under the starry sky. One choice meant losing something precious, and I knew that whatever decision I made would change my life forever. It was time to tell the truth that would determine my future once and for all. I sat in the car, leaning my head on the steering wheel, trying to digest everything that had happened. My choice had been made, but why did I feel like I'd lost as much as I gained? The lights of the evening city flashed outside the window, but I couldn't see them. There were only two faces in front of my eyes, one sad but understanding, the other filled with joy and expectation. I knew there was no turning back. My heart was breaking, but my mind convinced me that everything had happened as it should. I had made a decision that I thought would lead to happiness, but the residue on my soul kept me on my toes. Had I betrayed someone, or had I betrayed myself? A few weeks passed. A new life was beginning to take shape. We moved into a new apartment, filled it with our laughter, our conversations, the smells of home-cooked food. I tried to live in the present, but the shadows of the past wouldn't go away. Sometimes, when she fell asleep next to me, I caught myself mentally going back to the day when I had to say the words that changed everything. Over time, the pain subsided, but it wasn't completely gone. A slight sadness remained, a reminder that there are always choices in life, and every choice comes with a price. I didn't know if it was the right decision, but I knew one thing: I had to go forward, no matter what. I stood at the threshold of my own life, realizing that there was no turning back. My heart was torn between two people whom I loved differently, but equally strongly. It seemed that every decision, every step could change not only my fate, but also the fate of those who were close to me. A week had passed since that night when everything became clear. I tried to live a normal life, but it was no longer the same. My visits with Laura became rare, but when I saw her, my heart clenched with pain and tenderness at the same time. Her eyes spoke more than words, and the slight tremor in her voice betrayed how hard it was for her. On the other side was Kate, my stability, my confidence in the future. She didn't suspect anything, but something in her gaze told me she sensed the change. I tried to be the same as I'd always been, but the lies were becoming a heavy weight I could no longer carry. I sat in my car one night, looking out the window light at our house. Kate was there, my wife, the woman I was building a family and a future with. But inside me, everything was screaming that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize my future. Who do I see it with? Who will be there for me when I wake up 10, 20 years from now? In that moment, I realized there was no more choice. I couldn't keep living a double life, couldn't keep both of them waiting, couldn't betray myself. I had to take the last, most difficult step, to tell the truth. I started the car and headed toward the very apartment where Laura was waiting for me. This night would change my life forever. I never thought my life could unfold like this. This whole love triangle, which I didn't even fully realize, began to crumble, and I found myself in the middle of it. Every morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, not knowing how I should move forward. The choices I had to make weren't just difficult, they seemed impossible. I felt like I couldn't lose either of them. They had both become a part of me, as if ingrained into my soul. One gave me stability, comfort, peace of mind. With him I could be sure of the future. He was my home, my safe haven. But the other, he was a storm, a flash of lightning in the night, an explosion of emotion that made me feel alive, real, burning from the inside out. How could I choose between air and fire? I tried to avoid making a decision, stretching out the moments of uncertainty. But the truth was that it was impossible to procrastinate any further. The longer I procrastinated, the more our lives crumbled. I could see the pain in their eyes. I could see how one was beginning to doubt my fidelity, how the other was hurting from not being able to be with me fully. I didn't want to hurt them, but that's exactly what I was doing with my silence, my indecision. One day, I woke up with a clear realization. This could not go on. I could no longer play the role of the one standing between two worlds. I had to make a move, no matter how painful it was, no matter how horrible it seemed. I had to choose. I drove to the park, a place that always helped me gather my thoughts. The trees swayed in the slight breeze. The air was cool but pleasant. I sat down on the bench and closed my eyes, letting the memories come flooding back. First meetings, first kisses, confessions, fights, moments of happiness. It all swirled in my head like a kaleidoscope of feelings. I thought about each of them, what they gave me, and how I felt around them. The answer came unexpectedly. It was as if it had always been inside me. I was just afraid to voice it. My heart had made the choice for me. Now, there was only one thing left to do, say it out loud, and then my life would change forever. I thought that once I made my decision, I would feel better, that the weight of uncertainty would disappear. But the reality was more complicated. A storm was raging inside me. Although the choice had been made, the wounds of the situation were still fresh, and I couldn't just erase the past from my mind. I sat in the coffee shop, in the corner by the window, looking out at the gray morning sky. I was clutching a cup of cold coffee in my hands, but I didn't even try to take a sip. My thoughts swirled around what had happened. Matthew, his eyes the moment I told him the truth were forever etched in my memory. There was so much pain in them, so much disappointment, but not anger. He nodded silently, letting me go without reproach, without tears. I always wanted you to be happy. His voice echoed in my head like an echo of the past. I knew I had made the right choice, but if that's the case, why do I hurt so much? Why do I feel like a traitor? Matthew had been there for me in the most difficult moments, supporting me, helping me, loving me unconditionally. But my heart chose someone else. Was there anything I could do to change it? Only now I realized that love is not only joy, but also responsibility, pain, sacrifice. And in this triangle, there could be no winners. Someone had to walk away with a wounded heart. I reached for my phone, scrolling through the messages. James, I'd chosen him. His love was different, fiery, passionate, enveloping. He made me alive. He made me feel like life was an adventure, not just a series of daily routines. But would it be enough to be happy? The screen flickered on. A message from James. How are you? Been thinking about you all night, waiting for you to be ready to talk. I typed a reply, but didn't send it. What should I tell him? That I'm scared, that I'm not sure if I can live up to his expectations, that I'm tormented by guilt. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. It's time. I need time. A few minutes later, I walked out of the coffee shop, The cold air hit my face, clearing my thoughts. I knew there was still a long road to healing ahead, but one thing was certain. I couldn't change the past, but I could try to build the future, just as long as I didn't make a mistake. With these thoughts in mind, I took the first step toward a new life. I always thought I knew who I was, but this day shattered everything I thought I was. When the phone rang, I was overcome with the feeling that something important was about to happen. The muffled voice on the other end informed me that I needed to come over immediately. No explanation, no details, just the cold necessity to act. Everything inside me tensed, but I couldn't ignore the call. Thoughts swarmed in my head as I drove. The car was moving through streets flooded with yellow light. It seemed to me that the world outside continued to live its normal life, while my own was falling apart. At last I found myself in front of an old house I had never seen before. It looked abandoned. The windows were dark, and there was a strange silence all around. The wait seemed like an eternity, until I noticed a dark figure at the gate. I felt I was approaching something inevitable. In the man's hands was an envelope, which he held out to me. I felt the weight of it, and I felt cold inside. Whatever it was, it could change everything. Inside, I found pictures. The first image made me freeze. A small child myself, but not in the family I grew up in. On the back was an inscription with a date and words I couldn't realize right away. The next picture showed a woman and a man standing in front of a house that looked vaguely familiar. They were holding me in their hands. The documents in the same envelope confirmed what I couldn't yet accept. Everything I had been told about my past was a lie. Raised in one family, I actually belonged to another. I had been stolen many years ago. I didn't know how long I stood there, clutching the envelope. The air felt heavy, and each realization came in waves, making my mind refuse to accept reality. I had a choice now: accept the truth or continue living the old lies, return to the life I was accustomed to, or find out everything to the end. I looked up at the house, at my past, to the darkness that hid the answers. Every step I was about to take could change my future forever. Everything I knew about myself turned out to be a lie. Standing in front of the house with the envelope in my hands, I could feel my world falling apart. I needed to know the truth before then, or I would never be able to move on with my life. I opened the door and stepped inside. The smell of old wood and dust hit my nose, but that wasn't the main thing. There were pictures hanging on the walls, faces I didn't know, but who I thought were a part of me. An old dresser stood in the corner, and inside I found a box with even more papers. Reading line by line, I finally understood the whole picture. I had indeed been stolen years ago. The ones I thought were my parents were not my real mother and father. They took me away from my real family when I was only a few months old and raised me as their own. Why? Because they couldn't have children of their own. They made up a story that I was their own son, kept any hint of the truth from me. And my real parents, they searched for me. For years, they never gave up, but they lost track of me. Eventually they stopped believing they could find me. My father died a few years ago, never knowing his son was alive. My mother, she was alive, but no longer hoping for a miracle. I found it hard to breathe. How could I not know? How could I live side by side with those who lied to me? I couldn't stay in that house any longer. Grabbing my papers, I jumped outside and got into the car. The road ahead was long, but I had no choice. I had to meet her. When I arrived, everything clenched in my chest. It was a small, modest house. I stood at the door for a long time before I could knock. The door opened. Standing in front of me was an elderly woman. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. She didn't ask questions. She didn't question. She didn't doubt. She knew. I took a step forward and she hugged me tightly. At that moment I realized that I was no longer alone, that I had finally found what I had been looking for all my life.